Hey everyone, welcome back to Legacy Builders with Bryan Dulaney. In this episode, we're talking about Tony Robbins and the value that I got from him and my experience privately masterminding with him in Fiji at his private resort and in his backyard here in Florida. I received invaluable insights into my business and in my life personally, and I look forward to sharing that with you.
Legacy Builders, if you had the opportunity to sit down with Tony Robbins and ask him any question about your life or your business, what would it be? I'm sure the answers would be all over the place, but everybody would love to have that opportunity. Bryan, you had this chance, and you've had this chance a couple times over the last couple of years. Tell me more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely an honor and blessing to be what I say, have Tony Robbins' brain on my business. And it started back a couple years ago in Fiji when we placed number 5 on the biggest launch in internet history that did over $40 million in like 2 weeks. And so because of that, we found ourselves in a place where we got to go to Namalé. It's a resort over in Fiji that Tony owns and has owned for a while. Absolutely beautiful place, stunning tropical place. That's incredible. And so I found myself at this place because I was a top affiliate. I invested over $100,000 into advertising and promoting Tony's program that he released with Dean Graziosi. Thankfully to Russell Brunson for letting me know about it, because Russell was the one that let me know that he was doing this with Tony and with Dean. And because it fit so well within who we serve as an audience, we serve experts. So it fit really well together. Now, if Tony was launching something that was completely out of scope of who we serve, it wouldn't have made sense. But because of, his program and what we do was so connected, it made a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, the way that I looked at it was, how much would I spend? How much would I invest to have Tony's brain on my business? How much would I spend to hang out for a week in Fiji with the top 10 affiliates on the biggest campaign in internet history? Well, for me, it was more than $100,000. It was worth every bit of $100,000 as an expense, right? Now, mind you, we made a lot more than that. We had over $100,000 in profit from that campaign. So it wasn't an expense at all, really. But coming into it, it was an expense. And then we made our expense back about 45 days after we promoted it from the commissions that came through. And I was in Fiji. I went literally about 3 or 4 days after my daughter was born, my first daughter, Victoria Rose. She was born on September 8th. And I flew out a couple of days later because it was set in stone. Can't really change the trip. It was Tony's dates, and we were forced into those days together. Unfortunately, my wife didn't make it, but I was able to go, and it was a great time. And there was a lot of things that I learned from Tony, but there was a lot of other things that I picked up from the other people that were there. Really, the collective concept of a mastermind was applied. It was really, truly a mastermind. But it was also a time of reflection, and it was a time of being able to rest and reset as well. And I'd say one of the big questions that I asked Tony was about financial strategy, being that at the time we lived in California. And so I asked Tony what was his, really his financial strategy, if you will, of how he thinks about finances and how he makes investments and how he keeps more than he gives away. Let's put it that way. And so Tony said to me, he said, I used to live in La Jolla. It's a beautiful place, as you guys do. And at the time we did. And he said, but I moved to Florida, and the amount of money that I've saved by moving to Florida completely paid for my $25 million house over in Palm Beach. So he said, if you want to live in California, that's great. You just have to make more money. Or if you want to keep more of the money that you make, I'd recommend moving to Florida. Now, this was at a time where I wasn't really ready to move to Florida. I wasn't ready to, I was contemplating, my wife and I were contemplating moving somewhere, but we weren't, there was no urgent need at the moment. And it wasn't for about, I don't know, probably about 6 months later, it really set in. And then we ended up making the move across the country and moving to beautiful Sarasota, Florida, which is where we're at now. But at the time, that was his advice. And so that was a huge piece of advice. If you think about it, it plays into the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, he definitely influenced our decisions. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of other reasons why we moved to Florida outside of a financial conversation. It was a lot deeper than that, especially after 2020 came down the pike and everything that changed in the world and everything that became more visible to being a place where it's like, do I really want to raise my kids here? And the answer was no. And that's why we ended up leaving California and moving to Florida, which is where we live now. And we love it. The other thing that he said at the time, remember, this was about middle of September, 2019. And he impressed upon everyone that winter is coming. In fact, he said that in multiple ways. He said that winter is coming in a way that we've never seen before and that you need to be prepared for it. And he didn't really talk about much on like how to prepare for it, but he said that we need to be prepared for it. And many of us were thinking that it would be a financial correction in the market, right? Like 2008, there was a financial correction and, a lot of people had to make a pivot, right? Had to shift in dramatic ways. And so we all thought that that's what it was going to be. And in reality, it was completely different than what we were thinking, right? But I'm glad and grateful that we were able to prepare a little bit mentally for winter, this quote unquote winter that everybody experienced in the beginning of 2020. So those are some of the biggest takeaways from Tony, personal advice. Now, I could sit here for hours and talk about the different feedback that he gave to each of the people in the room, like Russell, how he shifted his perspective on selling his company, or the other people that were in the room. He gave strategic advice because all of us got the opportunity to ask one question, and we went around the room and about 10 of us asked a question that Tony then poured into, and he didn't hold back. I mean, Tony was relaxed, right? He was chill, but he was there for us, and he played full out like he always does. And we were there for probably 6 or 7 hours, just going through each person's different situation that they were experiencing, whether it was relational or whether it was business or whether it was just life. Tony we hit on every level because everyone was having different issues, but it was really amazing to see Tony in an environment that was more relaxed, that was really like his home, right? His place, his getaway, his retreat, right? And it was really an amazing, special place to be.
What was your question? Do you remember?
My question specifically was around finances, and it was around, what would he do strategically from a financial perspective to keep more money in his pocket than giving it away. So that was what led to
the Florida recommendation.
Correct.
Cool. I'm sure his answers saved you a lot of money since then.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah, that's
they
amazing.
have. It's a very strategic move.
You guys also got to, you were in Fiji, so you got to do amazing things like fishing and all this other stuff too.
Oh, yeah. So beyond the wisdom from Tony, we had the opportunity to do snorkeling or scuba diving, actually. And then we went deep sea fishing because I love fishing. I mean, that's why we moved to Sarasota. I love being in the ocean. I love fishing. I love big game fishing, specifically marlin, tuna, all types of fun stuff like that. So we were in Fiji. I had no idea that the fishing game was insane. And within about 4 hours, we had like a 65-pound wahoo on the line. We had over 1,000-pound marlin that was on the line for 30 minutes until it broke loose. And we caught fish after fish after fish. And what was really cool is that we got to bring all that fish back. We threw it, they chopped it up for us, threw it in a trash bag. And I was like Santa coming in with a big old trash bag of fish, but they cooked the fish up. We have a variety of species of fish, but they ended up cooking that fish up in a number of different ways. And then for the rest of the trip, we had our fish that we caught literally that day. It was absolutely amazing. And then being able to feed everyone else. I mean, we fed the entire mastermind with the fish that we caught hours before we caught it. We brought it in, they cooked it, and fed everyone in the group, which was really awesome.
Amazing. And then, so a year later, you kind of got to do a similar thing, but actually visit at Tony's place that he had moved to in Florida.
Yeah. So we did the promotion again. I committed to Dean that I would put $250,000 into their second launch, which is a commitment that I made because of how well we did the first year. I said, well, if we do this again, then we'll just put more money at it, right? It's like scaling a campaign, right? When you throw money into a campaign, if it does well, then you put more into it, right? And that's where we were. I mean, I did really well the first time. We profited over $100,000 in affiliate commissions, beyond, enrolling more than $1 million through our mastermind and our agency. Beyond that, that's completely different, but it's connected, right? It's all part of the same process of people that came through working with us. And then the second year, not only did we commit $250,000, but then I'm assuming, and I'm sure that Dean used that as leverage to get other people on board to promote as well. And the second year was actually harder because I shared some of my strategies with some of the people that also came to the table the second year and partnered with other people.
Right.
And so we had it was more competitive. There was more affiliates and there was a lot more budget. You see, the first year, not a lot of people had faith that because they had never done it before. I had faith because I knew that Tony can sell and that what he sells does well. Like that was my basis of being able to go in and not hold back, right? A lot of people held back. The second year, people had seen how successful we had been the first year without a huge audience, but using advertising to, make it happen. And I mean, several friends of mine threw in $100,000, $200,000 individuals. I mean, there was several other individuals the second year. So the second year was more competitive, but we placed number 4. So we actually placed better. And we found ourselves back masterminding with Tony again. And it was kind of like a reunion, actually. And it was here in Florida. So we didn't have to travel across the country this time. We got to just drive across the state and stay at a resort over by his house in Palm Beach.
And your wife got to come this time.
And my wife got to come this time. She was excited. My wife, my daughter were there. She got a chance to meet Tony, and she got a chance to be a part of that experience, which was awesome. It'll be definitely, those two experiences will be an experience and experiences that I'll always remember. Not just from the advice and the wisdom that you get, but just the experience that gets created in that environment is something that you'll always remember. But the second year, we went really deep on what their strategy was going to be on their next launch, which was their third launch, that I supported, but I didn't support in the same way because I had other things that I was focused on. So third year, they did a challenge. And I love challenges, right? I talk about that, in earlier episodes. Is challenges are great. And great ways to add value, great ways to show proof of concept, proof of results, your mountain of evidence, right? Like challenges are great. So we got to mastermind on their challenge that they did where we put about 1 million people into it over the course of a couple weeks. And so it was really cool to see, kind of behind the scenes of how they think about producing challenges. Right. And I have notes, pages and pages and pages and pages of notes, which at one point, someday I may publish those, just to share some of the dialogue and the conversations and the high level notes that I absorbed, in going through that experience. But it was a really successful, campaign, but it all started really there, in Florida, masterminding with the top 10 affiliates, which if you think about it, it's a brilliant strategy, right? So if you have affiliates, if you use affiliates to grow your business, which is a smart thing to do, that's the whole concept of Dream 100, right? You create a list of 100 people that can support you. In fact, the first year in Fiji, Russell interviewed me and talking about how I deployed the Dream 100 strategy in our business. And my response to him was pretty simple. It was like, listen, Russell, I do it to you. Like I've promoted ClickFunnels without ever asking for anything in return. in hopes of in the future being able to ask you for a favor, right? And then he eventually this year, actually, I asked him to write the foreword for my book, The Entrepreneur Evangelist, and he said yes, right? So it was cool to see kind of how that comes all full circle, right? But if you're using affiliates to grow your business, incorporate some type of like top 10 promotion where you get to go somewhere really amazing, like Fiji or like, Tony's backyard in Florida, where you get to mastermind with really high level people, right? That was really what got me to go all in on promoting these guys 2 years in a row, was because I wanted to be around the table with Tony Robbins and with Dean and with Russell and with all of these people to get to know them on a deeper level, to maybe strike up maybe affiliate relationships or just to glean information from, how they're running and operating their business or their campaigns, right? And it's cool to see like the aftermath, right? Like the aftermath of a mastermind. It's cool to see now, like we're doing investments together. And it's cool to see like the consulting and collaboration in the mastermind, to be able to see the campaigns be executed in real time. I mean, that is incredible. I mean, where else do you get that? And it's another reason I joined masterminds, is because you get to talk about things before they happen, right? Like Russell was telling me about ClickFunnels 2.0 in Florida while only a handful of people knew the feature sets of ClickFunnels 2.0. And even he couldn't tell me all the details because he wanted to keep a lot of that private. But he was able to tell me about some things that, even at Funnel Hacking Live in 2021, this year, he didn't even mention some of those features that he told me about. So it was really an awesome part. It was really an awesome experience, worth every penny of my investment to support Tony and Dean in this way, where I get to earn the right to sit at the table and collaborate with these guys.
What was your question the second year?
My question the second year was around my dad. So at the time, and it's tough, it's like you have 1,000,001 questions to ask Tony, right? It's like if you get to ask Tony Robbins, one question, what would it be, right? And it's hard to really drill down on that. Well, for me, I was going through, at the moment, my dad was dealing with stage 4 cancer. He's since now gone to be with the Lord. But my dad was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I thought, there's really nothing else more important than my dad right now. So one of the most incredible, amazing blessings of promoting Tony and Dean the first year and the second year was the fact when I found out my dad had stage 4 cancer, I was able to call Dean and say, hey, man, if you found out your dad had cancer, where would you send him? Who would you call? And so Dean then texted Tony, and then Tony said, hey, let's get Bryan's dad in with this doctor down in Texas. And then boom, the guy wasn't even seeing new patients, but he got us in. So because of that relationship, right, because I supported them, they supported me. And I didn't really understand, like in the beginning when I promoted these guys, I had like this internal conviction that I really needed to do it and it was really important. And then comes full circle, like years later, I then realized how God was orchestrating me to do that. And I really do believe that it's because of my dad and what he was going to be going through at a later point in time, which really wasn't that far off. It was only, 2 years later. So that really, in my opinion, would have never happened because I didn't have an in or connection with Tony that closely before. But now I do because of how I supported Tony, how I supported Dean with making their launch successful, right? They, in return, kind of scratched my back and helped me out and led me to the right person to help my dad the best that they could.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was just that was a side blessing, right, of supporting those guys. Mm-hmm. Right. So that was my question. My question was, what would you do if you found out your dad had stage 4 cancer? What would you be doing with him and for him in these, difficult days ahead? Mm-hmm. And Tony went really deep. He spent about 30 minutes talking about, what he would do, where he would send him, treatments that have him take, He talked about what he would avoid. He also went in and talked about how in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to have the technology for our children to live until they're 200 years old if they want, which was like, I think it got everybody curious about what that was going to be. Right. And he talked about a book that he's writing called Life Force, I think he's calling it, that's going to be about longevity and about health and about, long life, like living longer. And the technology apparently that's going to be coming down the pike in 10 to 15 years. I would love to know what some of that technology is. Tony didn't go into the specifics, but I guess in his book he will be. And, but it was all part of the same dialogue and same conversation, which was living longer, and how do you live? And so I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to ask that question because that's what I was dealing with at the time. And Tony really poured into that, answering that question the best of his ability. And really ultimately that question also, I believe, cracked the group open a little bit more to be able to be vulnerable and go deeper in different areas. Because a lot of it up until that point was business related questions, right? Like, how do I grow my business? How do I scale my business? And there were just different types of questions that weren't really hitting to the core of life. And, quite frankly.
Right. I think there's these moments in our life when something happens or a conversation happens and we see certain things different than before. It's like, pre-conversation and post-conversation, everything looks different. I imagine there's some things that you probably just look at differently or think through differently after getting to spend some time with Tony and seeing how he does things. What are some things that in your life you're looking at differently now than you were before these experiences of getting to have kind of Tony's brain on your business and on some of your personal life?
Yeah. So one of the things that he said that was profound was that his minimal contribution level is 10 million a year, right? Like that's just his basic minimum contribution
for giving. Just
for giving. His giving goal is a 10 million a year. He gives more than that, but that's his baseline. Right. And so, if you just think about that and sit with that for a minute, it's like, where would you have to be in life and business in your career to cut a check for $10 million annually? Where that's an annual commitment, not a one-time commitment, but an actual annual commitment. And so that really is something that shifted our viewpoint and perspective on giving, right? And then the different things that he gives to, Tony went into where he contributes to, the things that he invests in from a philanthropic perspective, right? But then also, which was really fascinating, was where he puts his money into investments and different businesses. And one of the epiphanies or aha moments that I had during the second mastermind was Tony's business is a lot like ours from a diversification perspective. So Tony's net worth is now over 7 billion is what he said. And he's got about 74 companies that he's a part of, but he's a part of them in different ways. One company, he might just be an investor. Another company, he's an investor and he's a consultant. And then another company, he's an investor, he's a consultant, and they use his brand, kind of like Dean does. Dean uses his brand, right? So it was really fascinating. We went pretty deep on how does he decide when to use his brand, when not to use his brand, when to invest and when to consult, when to only invest. And so he actually went into pretty specific detail on the investments that he's making into robotics, into AI, into technology, right? Into all of these different sectors, all these different industries that are all going to be, key things in the future, right? So it was really fascinating to see where he puts his money. And then also he, basically told us, these are the people that I invest with, and these are the guys I trust with my money. And so he was really incredibly transparent and wasn't holding anything back, which was really amazing. I think because it was like a reunion. Many of us were back a second year. Half of the room was there the first year. So what was cool is that the second year, he was really just, I feel like, more open, more vulnerable, especially what transpired from year 1 to year 2, right? Like year 1, we were pre-pandemic. Year 2, we were post-pandemic, right? So he came from a different perspective altogether. And those are just, those are invaluable. I mean, both experiences worth at least $100,000 a piece. Even if I didn't make any of my money back from advertising his campaign, it would have been worth every penny, because I'm now able to, I have that for life, right? And I have those relationships, and I'm able to take them with me into the future. And I have a whole different perspective on investing, on giving, contribution. I mean, it's a whole nother level that's really hard to express in words. Because, when you're around people that contribute and give at a higher level, usually it inspires you to give more, inspires you to contribute more, inspires you to create more so you can give more. Right.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, those are lessons you'll take with you forever that you'll never forget. And I think there's something strange that happens when we invest into advice, or we invest, whether it's time or effort or money, to really learn something. And, I don't think that Tony's advice would have hit you the same way if you heard that advice in a YouTube video that you saw for free. But, because you invested time, and even your own money and a lot of effort in promoting his stuff, I think that you kind of earned the right to be there. And so that message went even deeper and meant even more to you. So, like, how important is it that people are actually willing to invest in people and invest in advice rather than just kind of taking, I'll get whatever free advice or free coaching that I can get out there?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it boils down to the investments we make are going to help us to get to where we want to be in life. Right. And so choosing the right investments is obviously important, but to me, it's who are you surrounding yourself with that has a different perspective that can take you to the next level. Right. And a lot of times that's a mastermind, like we did with, in Fiji and in Florida, right? These are masterminds, and these are different people playing at different levels. Some of that, one of them being a billionaire, others being worth, hundreds of millions of dollars, and others worth, millions of dollars. So you've got a huge spectrum of different types of people in the room. Making an investment into that type of environment is worth every penny, but you got to play full out. You got to be ready to be in that room. I think for me, I earned the right, like you said, I earned the right to be there. So I had an appreciation for being there, right? Like if I was just invited as a friend, wouldn't have the same level of appreciation or attention to it, right? But because I put my heart on time, energy, and attention and money into it, I took it more seriously. I took notes. I did a lot more with the information than someone who was just like, oh, I'm along for the ride. Right. So I think it's important to invest in masterminds. It's important to get outside your circle of influence and get into people that are playing at a much higher level, because they're going to stretch your vision. They're going to stretch and expand your ability to think outside the current box that you're in. And we have to constantly be in an environment like that, because we're growing or we're going backwards. We're growing or we're going backwards. And we all want to be growing, right? So super valuable. Invest in people who are going to help you expand, and invest in groups of people who are going to help you expand and grow.
Yeah. Investing, being willing to invest in what you're willing to learn is so, so important. We're going to see that time and time again here on Legacy Builders. And we're working on, Tony's going to be on the show too. So that'll be fun to actually get to learn from him here on Legacy Builders. So Bryan, any kind of closing words in regards to kind of your time with Tony and Dean at these masterminds before we go?
Yeah. The other thing I would like to say that came up for me is, if you don't pay, you don't pay attention. Right. So that's a saying, right? If you don't pay attention. If you think about things that you invest in, that you pay for, you tend to pay more attention. You tend to have more urgency for, right? And sometimes the biggest investments we make are the ones that get our attention the most, aren't they? So absolutely. That's what I would advise. I would advise you to up level, to take your skill sets to the next level by investing in outside resources, like in masterminds or like consultants and coaches who can help sharpen your sword. And beyond that, I would challenge you as I, think about the experience of being in Fiji and the experience of being, in Florida with Tony, with Dean, with Russell, with Lewis Howes, with John Lee Dumas, with Jenna Kutcher. I mean, these are just a few of the people that were in the room. My encouragement to you is, how can you get in the room with people that are in your market that are leading? Mm-hmm. Or another way of saying it, and the advice for Tony, for Russell this year was, you need to get around people that have sold a software company for $1 billion or have a software company that's worth $1 billion, right? So Russell's goal is to build a company that ClickFunnels that gets to $1 billion valuation, and he hasn't hit it yet. So Tony's advice was, you need to start sticking yourself around people that have sold companies for $1 billion or who have companies that are worth $1 billion or more. Now, the challenge with that is that there's not a ton of people that are in that bucket, right? But nonetheless, the same thing can apply to you, right? If you want to build a $10 million a year, a $100 million a year, a $50 million a year, $1 million, whatever it might be, the numbers are relevant. You need to surround yourself with people that are already experiencing that on a day-to-day basis, or who have already accomplished that. Find a way to get yourself around those people and stay engaged constantly, frequently with those people, right? It's not just a one-time experience that's going to help you grow. You need to be constantly immersed around people who have been at that level or have blown past it. And that's where you need to start thinking, who's in my circle now and who do I need to get into my circle? Right?
Absolutely.
Because your current circle, most people's current circles are people that are playing at a lower level than they are. So how are lower level people going to help you go to the next level? They're not. They're in fact possibly going to pull you back down to their level. Right? And so I want you to think about, as I conclude here today, I want you to think about, who do you need at your table? Okay. If you think about, Jesus and the 12 disciples, like, who needs to be at your table? Who's the 12 people that need to be in your corner helping you go to the next level? It first starts with that first person. Then you can start expanding it to 2 people, then 3 people, then 4 people, then 5 people. What I've found is the fastest path is to join a mastermind and just insert yourself into that environment. That'll help you grow. That's probably the fastest path. But there will be potentially a time in your career where you've outgrown that and you need to find a new group. And I've certainly been in that place. So start asking the questions now, start looking, start thinking, and start investing in resources outside of your own capabilities. And you'll see you will naturally start to begin to grow and start making a greater impact in people's lives.
Love it. It's a great way to end. If you pay, then you pay attention. And, we're going to hear more and more stories on the show of the value that is coming out of putting yourself around people who have solved bigger problems than you have currently and can kind of pull you into those solutions. So this has been great. Bryan, thanks again for being willing to share some of your stories and insights that you learned from getting to mastermind with Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on Legacy Builders, and I would encourage you to come back to the next episode next week to get more clarity on your journey to launch your expertise online, scale your impact, and build your legacy. If you're ready to get the process started of launching your expertise online the right way, then I recommend go to launchexpertise.com, or maybe you're at a place where you're ready to really scale your expertise and your impact. Go to launchexpertise.com. There you'll have several options. Number 1, you can get a free copy of my brand new book, The Entrepreneur Evangelist, which I share the secrets that have unlocked more than $300 million of results for my clients, my partners, and our own campaigns. You could also join a 33 days of coaching with me that's free, where I give you insights and wisdom on your journey to launching your expertise and scaling your impact over the course of 33 days. And that's worth at least $5,000, but for right now, you can get it for free. And lastly, if you're someone who wants to take the absolute faster, smarter path When it comes to launching your expertise online and scaling your impact, I'd recommend scheduling a call with my team where we can see how we can support you to crush goals and generate 7 or 8 figures yourself in a short period of time. We have more awards than nearly anyone in the entire community, and for good reason. And we would love to help you just like we've helped them. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Legacy Builders.